The wilderness holds secrets that some dare not speak of. In these mountains, where the pines whisper ancient warnings and the shadows stretch longer than anywhere else, something unexpected happened 15 years ago. A woman vanished into the forest, carrying with her 2 infants and a desperate hope. But this isn't a story about disappearance. This is about what happens when someone who's been watching, waiting, finally decides to act. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mountain air hung thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth as Sarah Whitaker stumbled through the underbrush. Her arms ached from carrying the twins, their soft cries echoing through the silent forest. 3 days. 3 days since she'd fled the cabin that had promised safety but delivered only terror. Behind her, she imagined footsteps that weren't there. Every branch crack sent her heart racing. Her ex-husband's threat still rang in her ears. "You think, you can run from me? I'll find you anywhere." But these mountains were vast, unforgiving, and hopefully his reach didn't extend this far. The twins, Emma and Ethan, had reached that desperate stage of hunger where their cries became weak, almost pleading. Sarah pressed on, though her legs trembled with exhaustion. She'd been heading west, toward what she hoped might be civilization, or at least a road. The map she'd grabbed had long since become sodden with rain and useless. 20 miles north, in a weathered observation blind concealed among ancient oaks, Marcus Sullivan lowered his binoculars. He'd been tracking her progress for 72 hours now, not stalking, that would imply malice, but observing, calculating, waiting for the right moment to intercede. Marcus knew these mountains, like most people knew their neighborhood. Born and raised at the base of Mount Harrison, he'd spent his 53 years learning every cave, ravine, and hidden spring. His father had been a park ranger, his grandfather a hunter, and Marcus continued the family tradition of guardianship. Over this vast wilderness, he'd first spotted Sarah 3 days ago, emerging from the abandoned miners' trail near Coal Creek. Her descent into the lower valleys had been clumsy, marking her as an outsider. But it was the babies that had caught his attention. Twin infants in these mountains, carried by a woman who clearly had no wilderness experience. This demanded closer observation. Through his scope, he'd watched her struggle with basic navigation. She'd attempted to drink from Silver Creek, upstream, from where mining runoff still contaminated the water. He'd seen her nearly step into a concealed ravine that had claimed 2 hikers last autumn. Each time she'd stumbled away from danger just before it claimed her. Sarah's knowledge of survival extended only to what she'd hastily researched in the week before fleeing. She knew to follow rivers downstream. Theoretically, they led to civilization. She understood that moss didn't always grow on the north side of trees. She'd brought matches wrapped in plastic, but the constant drizzle made finding dry kindling nearly impossible. On the morning of the 4th day, Sarah reached a decision. Point. Before her stretched 2 valleys, one narrow and steep, the other broader but covered in unstable shale. Her map was gone, carried away by wind during a particularly treacherous descent. The twins had stopped crying, their silence more terrifying than their wailing. She chose the broader valley, not knowing it dead-ended in a series of impassable cliffs. This valley had another name among locals, Devil's Trap. Many had entered, fewer emerged. Marcus had anticipated this choice. He'd been there himself at 17, on his first solo expedition, nearly perishing before his father found him 3 days later. The valley offered an illusion of safety with its gradual slope and abundant game trails, but those trails led nowhere useful. He watched Sarah pick her way across the loose shale, her steps growing more uncertain. The twins stirred fitfully against her chest, their small fists clutching at her torn shirt. She'd fashioned a sling from her jacket, but it was inadequate for the terrain. By noon, Sarah had realized her mistake. The promised river had dwindled to a trickle, then disappeared entirely into the porous limestone. The game trails diverged and converged in a maze that suggested purpose but delivered confusion. She sat on a fallen log, head in her hands, while Emma finally began to cry again, a thin, hungry sound that echoed off the valley walls. Marcus moved closer, using techniques his father had taught him. In these mountains, approaching wildlife without detection was essential. Approaching desperate humans required even greater care. He had no way of knowing what she was fleeing from, only that her fear made her unpredictable. From his new vantage point behind a cluster of boulders, he could see the full extent of her situation. Her supplies had dwindled to a single water bottle, 3 granola bars, and a handful of baby formula. Her shoes were falling apart, duct tape barely holding the soles together. Blood had seeped through makeshift bandages on her feet, leaving a trace even the cleverest tracker would notice. Sarah stood abruptly, turning in a slow circle. For a moment, Marcus thought she might have detected his presence, but she was surveying the valley, looking for options that didn't exist. The walls rose steeply on 3 sides, their surfaces bearing the marks of countless failed climbing attempts. Scrapes, gouges, broken handholds. She chose to try anyway. With Ethan secured to her back and Emma cradled against her chest, Sarah approached the eastern wall. The rock appeared more weathered here, offering potential grips. She'd never climbed before, but desperation provided instruction. The first 5 feet went smoothly. The rock held firm under her weight, and the babies remained quiet. At 10 feet, she paused, looking down for the first time. The ground seemed impossibly far away. Her arms began to shake. Marcus had positioned himself directly below her, though she didn't know it. If she fell when she fell, his long experience told him, he would at least try to break her landing. The babies would survive a fall from this height if she managed to twist herself beneath them, but the impact would almost certainly kill her. At 15 feet, her foot slipped on a patch of loose shale. Her fingers scraped against rock as she slid, desperately searching for purchase. She caught herself on a small outcropping, but the sudden jolt caused Emma to cry out. The sound startled a family of ravens from a nearby ledge, their harsh calls filling the valley. She descended slowly, each foot placement careful and deliberate. By the time she reached solid ground, tears streamed down her face. The babies had begun crying in earnest, Emma's powerful wail counterpointed by Ethan's softer whimper. Marcus remained hidden as she slumped against the valley wall. He watched her nurse Emma, then Ethan, using the last of her formula to supplement her dwindling milk supply. She spoke to them in soothing tones, telling them stories about the house they would have, the garden they would plant, the safe life waiting for them somewhere beyond these mountains. The sun began its descent toward the western peaks, painting the valley in shades of amber and shadow. Sarah gathered deadwood with methodical desperation, building a small fire pit against the cliff face. She had enough matches for perhaps 3 more attempts if the wood was too damp. The first match sparked, but died immediately. The second caught, briefly before the wind extinguished it. Sarah shielded the third flame with her hand, coaxing it to life among the smallest twigs. Success brought momentary relief, though the thin smoke would do little to warm them through the coming night. Marcus made his decision then. He'd observed enough to understand the gravity of her situation and the genuine care she showed the children. Whatever she was running from, she wasn't fleeing from responsibility to her babies. If he waited much longer, the twins might not survive the night. He began preparing for contact, checking that his own supplies were readily accessible. Water, food, medical kit, and a satellite phone for emergency calls. His cabin lay 17 miles northeast, accessible by paths only he knew. Getting there with an exhausted woman and 2 infants would take the better part of 2 days, assuming she accepted his help. As darkness crept into the valley, Sarah arranged. pine boughs to create a barrier against the rock wall. She hummed lullabies to the twins, her voice catching on certain notes. The fire crackled and popped, sending occasional sparks toward stars that were just becoming visible. Marcus moved into his final observation position, weighing his approach. Direct contact might frighten her further. She carried herself with the wariness of someone betrayed, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Yet he couldn't risk delay. The temperature would drop below freezing soon, and that meager fire wouldn't sustain them. His foot snapped a branch, intentionally. Sarah's head whipped toward the sound, her body tensing for flight. The babies sensed her fear and began to fuss. "Hello," Marcus called softly, keeping his hands visible as he stepped into the firelight. "I couldn't help noticing you might need some assistance." Sarah scrambled backward, pressing herself against the rock wall. "Stay away from us," she warned, her voice trembling but determined. I have a knife." He stopped 20 feet away, noting that she didn't actually reach for any weapon. "My name is Marcus Sullivan. I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I have water, food, and medicine if you need any." "How long have you been watching us?" The question emerged flat, accusatory. "Since you entered the valley system 4 days ago. I was concerned when I saw you had children with you. These mountains can be dangerous even for experienced hikers." The twins crying intensified. Sarah looked down at them, then back at Marcus, conflict evident on her face. Fear battled against the reality of their situation. They were trapped, supplies depleted, with a harsh night approaching. "I don't need help from strangers," she said, but the statement lacked conviction. "No, I suppose you don't." Marcus slowly sat down on a fallen log, making himself less threatening. "But your children might. Do they have names?" A moment of silence, stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and fussing babies. "Emma and Ethan," she finally answered. "Beautiful names. How old?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 3 months. Marcus nodded, processing this information. "Do you know where you are?" "In the mountains. Obviously. In Devil's Trap Valley specifically. It's called that because once you enter, it's extremely difficult to leave. The eastern wall you tried to climb? No one has successfully scaled it in over 60 years. The western side is worse. Vertical granite for 200 feet. Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly. "And the way I came in?" "Blocked by a landslide last week. The rains have been heavy." This information seemed to drain the last of her resistance. She leaned forward, cradling both children. "What do you want?" "To help you get somewhere safe. I have a cabin 17 miles from here. Food, supplies, a satellite phone if you need to contact anyone." "Why?" The single word carried layers of suspicion. "Because those children don't deserve to suffer for adult decisions. Because I've seen what these mountains do to people who underestimate them. Because it's the right thing to do." Sarah studied him for a long moment. Marcus met her gaze steadily, understanding that this evaluation would determine everything. He saw her take in his weathered appearance, the utility vest marked with years of wear, the confidence with which he moved through the wilderness. "I can't pay you," she said finally. "I didn't ask for payment. People always want something. Sometimes people just want to help, especially when children are involved." The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the darkening sky. An owl called from somewhere above, its hunting cry both beautiful and eerie. "If I agree," Sarah began slowly. "How do we get out of here?" "Tomorrow, at first light. There's a path along the northern rim that's invisible unless you know where to look. It's narrow, sometimes treacherous, but it's the only way out now. I'll need to carry some supplies, which means you'll need to manage the twins. Are you strong enough?" She looked down at Emma and Ethan, their small faces peaceful in sleep, despite the earlier distress. "I'll manage. I have to." Marcus nodded, standing and brushing pine needles from his pants. Get some rest. I'll gather more firewood and set up a proper camp. In the morning, I'll show you something. What? Evidence that I really do know these mountains, that you can trust me to lead you out. As Marcus moved toward the tree line, Sarah called after him. Marcus! He turned back. Thank you for not just leaving us here. Get some sleep, Sarah. Tomorrow will be challenging, but you've already proven you're stronger than most people who find themselves in this situation. He disappeared into the shadows to gather wood, leaving Sarah alone with her sleeping children and the first glimmer of hope she'd felt in days. The mountain night settled around them, full of sounds that would have terrified her yesterday, but now seemed almost protective with Marcus nearby. In the distance, a wolf howled, not the threatening sound she'd imagined, but something almost mournful, as if the mountains themselves were acknowledging the fragility of the 3 human lives nestled against their unyielding walls. The night stretched on, and, though morning seemed impossibly far away, Sarah finally allowed herself to close her eyes. The twins slept fitfully against her, their small bodies radiating warmth. The fire crackled steadily, and somewhere in the darkness, Marcus maintained his vigil, the guardian she hadn't known she needed, until desperation made his presence a blessing rather than a threat. Dawn would bring new challenges, but for the first time since fleeing into these mountains, Sarah wasn't facing them alone. The first rays of dawn painted the valley walls in shades of rose gold when Sarah stirred. Marcus had kept the fire alive throughout the night, adding wood at precise intervals to maintain optimal heat without creating excess smoke. He'd positioned himself 20 yards away, giving Sarah space while remaining close enough to respond to any danger. "There's something you need to see before we leave," Marcus said, approaching with a steaming metal cup. "Coffee. It's instant, but it's caffeinated." Sarah accepted the cup with trembling hands, the warmth seeping into her skin. "What did you want to show me?" Marcus retrieved a worn leather journal from his pack, its pages yellowed and stained with decades of use. He opened it to reveal detailed maps, sketches of landmarks, and annotations in precise handwriting spanning different decades. Some entries were his, others belonged to his father and grandfather. "This is why you can trust me to navigate these mountains," he explained, turning to a specific page. 3 generations of knowledge. Look here." He pointed to a sketch of Devil's Trap Valley drawn 37 years ago. "My grandfather mapped every false trail, every dead end. I've updated it since." Sarah studied the intricate drawings. "It's beautiful, like an art piece. Beauty and survival aren't mutually exclusive out here." He flipped to another page, showing the exact path they would take. The Sullivan Trail. That's what locals call it, though it's never appeared on official maps. We've kept it secret because it's too dangerous for casual hikers. But you're willing to share it with me? You're not casual. You're fighting for your children's lives? As if on cue, Emma woke with a demanding cry. Sarah had rationed the remaining formula through the night, mixing it with purified water from Marcus's supply. The concentration was weaker than recommended, stretching it to last until they reached safety. "May I?" Marcus gestured to the twins. "I raised my sister after our parents died. 20 years ago, but you don't forget." Sarah hesitated, then carefully passed Ethan to him. Marcus cradled the infant with practiced ease, supporting the small head while maintaining eye contact. "Hello, young man. Ready for an adventure?" His voice shifted to the gentle tone reserved for babies. Ethan blinked owlishly, his tiny fingers grasping at Marcus's weathered jacket. "Your sister?" Sarah asked as she nursed Emma. "Died 5 years ago. Cancer. She lived long enough to give me a niece and nephew, though. They visit every summer." His expression softened with memory. "Emily always said I had a gift with children. Guess it comes from growing up responsible for her." This glimpse into Marcus's humanity eased another layer of Sarah's tension. She'd spent so long viewing all strangers as potential threats that trust felt foreign, almost dangerous. After breakfast, dried fruit, energy bars, and jerky from Marcus's pack, they prepared for departure. Marcus fashioned an improved carrier for the twins using his spare jacket and climbing rope, distributing their weight more evenly across Sarah's shoulders. "We need to reach Widow's Peak by nightfall," he explained, checking the security of their makeshift pack. "There's a cave there with a natural spring. We'll camp inside, protected from the elements." How far? 7 miles as the crow flies. 12 by the path we'll take. The elevation gain is significant. We'll climb nearly 3,000 feet. Sarah's face paled. "I couldn't even climb 15 feet yesterday. Yesterday you were alone and scared. Today you have someone who knows the way and children who need you to succeed. You'll find strength you didn't know you possessed." The journey began at the valley's narrowest point, where a barely visible split in the rock wall revealed the hidden path. Marcus moved ahead, pointing out foot placements and warning of loose stones. Sarah followed, her focus absolute as she navigated each careful step. The path was exactly as Marcus had described, invisible to anyone who hadn't walked it before. It switchbacked up the valley wall, sometimes narrowing to mere inches with sheer drops on either side. Sarah pressed herself against the rock face, trying not to look down. "Tell me about them," Marcus called back after 2 hours of steady climbing. "Emma and Ethan." Sarah is grateful for the distraction. "Emma's the fighter. She came out first, demanding attention from day one. Ethan's gentler, more observant. He watches everything with these huge eyes, like he's trying to understand the world. And their father?" The question hung in the mountain air. Sarah's steps faltered briefly before she continued. "That's complicated. Most things worth discussing are." They reached a wider ledge where the path temporarily leveled. Marcus called for a rest stop, distributing water and checking Sarah's feet. She'd developed new blisters despite his attempts to reinforce her damaged shoes. "We knew each other since high school," Sarah began, her gaze distant. "Married at 23. He was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted." She paused, gathering courage. "The first time he hit me, I was 4 months pregnant. He apologized, bought flowers, promised it would never happen again. But it did. Worse each time. By the time the twins were born," she shook her head. "I convinced myself I was protecting them by staying, keeping the family together. It wasn't until I caught him shaking Emma because she wouldn't stop crying that I knew I had to run." Marcus nodded slowly, processing this information. "Does he know you're here?" "I left a note saying I was going to my sister in California. Bought bus tickets to San Francisco, then caught a ride to the mountains with a truck driver. Paid cash for everything." Smart thinking. Not smart enough to prepare properly for this. She gestured at the wilderness surrounding them. "You had less than a week to plan an escape with 3-month-old twins. Under the circumstances, you've done remarkably well." They resumed climbing. The path grew more treacherous as they gained altitude, with some sections requiring Sarah to edge along narrow ledges while Marcus secured a rope around her waist. Trust became essential. Without it, forward progress was impossible. Around midday, they encountered their first major obstacle. A rock slide had obliterated 50 feet of the path. The remaining way forward involved traversing a steep slope of loose shale and boulders, with dense forest 30 feet below. "We can rope together," Marcus suggested, already securing his harness. "I'll go first. Test the stability of each step. You'll follow in my exact footprints. What if it gives way? It won't. But if something unexpected happens, the rope will catch you. The twins will be safe. They're the lightest weight." Sarah strapped on the harness with shaking hands. The slope appeared even more daunting up close, each rock potentially unstable. Marcus tested the first boulder, placing his full weight gradually. Solid. Step where I stepped. The crossing took 40 minutes of intense concentration. Each placement required careful testing. Loose stones skittered down the slope, their echoes suggesting significant depth below. Sarah's leg muscles screamed from the unusual angle, but she maintained focus, thinking only of Emma and Ethan's trust weight against her chest and back. They reached stable ground as the sun began its afternoon descent. Marcus had been right about Sarah's hidden strength. She'd accomplished something that would have terrified her in her former life. Impressive, Marcus acknowledged, offering water. Many experienced hikers fail at that crossing. I had motivation. And they didn't, Sarah replied, checking on the twins. Both had slept through most of the morning's journey, lulled by movement and possibly exhausted from the previous day's stress. The afternoon brought new challenges. The path entered a region Marcus's map labeled the Narrows, a series of canyons carved deep into the mountain over millennia. Here, the rock walls closed in until sunlight penetrated only briefly at noon. This section floods during heavy rain, Marcus warned. We need to move quickly but carefully. If a storm hits while we're inside, the implication was clear. The twins would have no protection from a flash flood. They entered the Narrows as the first clouds gathered at the mountain tops. The air felt different here, cooler, damp, carrying echoes from distant places. Sarah found herself wondering how many desperate souls had passed through this same passage, seeking escape from various threats. Listen, Marcus said suddenly, holding up his hand. Through the canyon walls came the unmistakable sound of rushing water. Sarah's heart climbed into her throat. Is that Thunder Peak River? We're actually hearing it bounce off the canyon walls. The river itself is still miles away. He consulted his journal. But those clouds worry me. We need to reach higher ground before they release. They quickened their pace, navigating the twisting passages with urgent efficiency. The path here required less technical skill but more endurance, winding endlessly through the broken landscape. Sarah's feet had gone numb hours ago, running on determination alone. As they emerged from the Narrows, the first raindrops began to fall. Marcus pointed toward a distant ridge where a dark opening marked a cave entrance. Widow's Peak. We're almost there. The final approach tested Sarah's exhausted body one last time. The path climbed steeply through loose scree, each step sliding back partially before finding purchase. Rain intensified, making the rocks slick and treacherous. Marcus stopped frequently to ensure Sarah's footing, his patient guidance stark contrast to the weather's mounting assault. Lightning began dancing between peaks, turning the landscape into a strobe-lit nightmare. We're going to make it, he assured her as thunder crashed nearby. 50 more feet, Sarah's world had narrowed to putting one foot before the other. The twins had begun crying from the cold rain, their distress cutting through her fatigue to provide extra motivation. 20 feet, 10, 5. They stumbled into the cave just as the sky opened fully. Rain poured down in sheets, transforming the path they'd just climbed into a waterfall. Lightning illuminated the valley below, revealing the immense distance they'd traveled. Inside the cave, Marcus quickly built a fire while Sarah tended to the soaked twins. The cave offered perfect shelter, deep enough to stay dry with a natural chimney that drew smoke upward without filling their living space. There's the spring, Marcus indicated a clear pool at the cave's rear. The water's potable. We can refill everything tonight. As warmth from the fire spread through the cave, tension finally released from Sarah's body. She changed the twins into dry clothes from Marcus's spare supplies, oversized shirts that he tied to create makeshift outfits. You saved us, she said, simply feeding Emma her evening meal. I would have died in that valley. We're not safe yet. Marcus didn't minimize the remaining challenge. Tomorrow's the hardest day. We descend into Cooper Valley, cross 3 rivers, then climb to Hunter's Pass. After that, it's 5 miles to my cabin. And then you rest, recover, and decide your next move. You have options. There are women's shelters 3 hours. Away, law enforcement, if you want to press charges, or I can help you make a new start somewhere. He'll never think to look. Sarah studied him across the firelight. Why are you doing this? Being honest, you could have left us in that valley. Could have called for rescue and let others handle it. Mountain rescue is hours away in good weather. Your children might not have had hours. He poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. And my grandmother fled an abusive marriage in the 1950s. No one helped her. She died in these mountains when my father was 10. The revelation cast their shared story in new light. Is that why you watch the trails? Someone has to. These mountains attract the desperate. Sometimes they need more than directions. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. Thunder followed almost immediately, the sound echoing through the cave system like distant drums. Rain continued its assault on the mountain, creating curtains of water at the cave entrance. Sarah arranged pine boughs to create beds, her movements more confident now. Exhaustion had transformed into something else, not quite comfort, but a sense of purpose beyond. Mere survival. Tell me about your cabin, she requested, settling with the twins against her makeshift mattress. It's nothing fancy. One main room with a sleeping loft, wood stove, solar panels for basic electricity. My grandfather built it in 1967. Each generation adds something. My father installed the solar system. I added the satellite phone terminal. Is it far from people? The nearest neighbor is 15 miles away. Town is 45 miles, 4 hours by the only road that stays open year-round. In winter, we're completely isolated. I maintain the cabin alone now, but there's room for others when needed. The implication wasn't lost on Sarah. She'd been thinking only of immediate survival, but tomorrow and its challenges hinted at possibilities beyond escape. Emma stirred against her chest, making small, contented sounds. Ethan had already fallen asleep, his breathing deep and regular, despite the storm raging outside. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something approaching peace. Marcus, yes? If I asked you to help me disappear completely, new identity, new life, could you? I know people who know people. It's not my area of expertise, but yes, it can be done. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want beyond keeping Emma and Ethan safe. Everything else feels impossible to plan for. The fire crackled softly. As rain drummed against rock, Sarah drifted between sleeping and waking, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Marcus maintained watch, adding wood to the fire at careful intervals. In the depths of the mountain night, the storm began to ease. What remained was the steady rhythm of rain, a lullaby that masked other sounds, the settling of ancient stones, the whispered conversations of nocturnal creatures, and the barely audible breathing of a woman who had traveled further than she'd ever imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new possibilities. But for now, high on the mountain's shoulder, 3 refugees and their unexpected guardian rested beneath layers of stone that had sheltered countless others before them. The mountain kept its secrets, but sometimes, in the right circumstances, it also offered sanctuary. Dawn broke with crystalline clarity after the storm, the air scrubbed clean and carrying the sharp scent of wet pine. Marcus woke before Sarah, stepping outside to assess conditions. The path had suffered damage. New slides and washouts would require careful navigation. He returned to find Sarah already awake, quietly singing to the twins. Her voice carried a melody he didn't recognize, something raw and personal that spoke of loss and hope intertwined. The storm left gifts, he announced, offering her hot oatmeal prepared from his supplies. The streams will be running clear and deep. We'll have plenty of fresh water. But the path? Manageable. Though we should wait until the rocks dry, maybe 2 hours. The morning sun hits this face directly. They used the waiting time to reorganize their supplies. Marcus revealed a secondary pack he'd been carrying, pulling out items he'd saved for This moment, waterproof socks for Sarah, sealed packets of baby formula, and a small medical kit. "You've been planning for this," Sarah observed. "Not quite a question. I've encountered others who needed help. Each experience teaches you something." "About preparation? How many? Over the years? Dozens? Lost hikers, people fleeing various situations, sometimes foolish teenagers thinking they can conquer these mountains with nothing but bravado." He paused, sorting through medical supplies. "Most need basic assistance. Directions, first aid, occasionally rescue. Few need the kind of help you require. How do you decide who to trust? Observation. Fear has different flavors. Guilt smells different from terror. Desperation shows differently than despair." He met her eyes. "You smell of determination, not deception." The assessment struck Sarah as both intimate and clinical. She'd spent months hiding her true feelings, even from herself. The idea that someone could read her so clearly was equally comforting and terrifying. Once the rocks had dried sufficiently, they prepared for departure. Marcus produced a camera from his pack, an old film model that surprised Sarah. "State evidence," he explained, photographing the cave entrance and their departure point. "If we need to prove your location on specific dates, physical film holds up better than digital." This detail revealed another layer of planning that Sarah hadn't considered. Marcus wasn't just helping her escape, he was creating a documented trail that could support her story if legal complications arose. The descent from Widow's Peak challenged different muscles than the previous day's climb. Sarah's thighs burned with the effort of controlled downward movement, each step requiring precise placement to prevent sliding. The twins seemed to sense the tension, remaining unusually quiet as if understanding their role in the delicate dance of navigation. 3 hours into their journey, they encountered evidence that someone else had recently passed this way. Prints, distinctly different from their own, marked a soft patch of earth where the trail briefly leveled. Marcus knelt, studying the impressions. 2 people moving fast, within the last 8 hours, before the rain, but after the main storm passed. Sarah's stomach clenched. Could they be looking for us? For me? More likely hikers caught by the storm, seeking shelter. The prince head toward Echo Basin, not your path of origin. His evaluation seemed thorough, yet Sarah noticed his increased vigilance as they resumed walking. The morning progressed with encounters that painted the mountains in a different light. They disturbed. A black bear and her cubs, the mother watching them with wary intelligence before deciding they posed no threat. A golden eagle circled overhead, possibly following them as potential scavengers for disturbed prey. Around midday, they reached Cooper Valley, a vast basin surrounded by cathedral-like peaks. 3 rivers converged here, swollen by runoff from the storm. The central crossing point, a natural ford marked by flat rocks, lay submerged beneath rushing water. "The rivers are too high for wading," Marcus assessed, consulting his journal. "We'll need to use the emergency bridge." Emergency bridge? Built by local search and rescue in 2008, not on any official maps. He led them along the northern riverbank, to a concealed location where thick cables anchored to both shores supported a narrow suspended walkway. The bridge swayed ominously as they approached. Its wooden planks had weathered to silver, and several boards showed signs of rot. Sarah's earlier confidence wavered. "I'll cross first with the supplies," Marcus decided, "then guide you across. The twins will be safest with you, your center of gravity is better for balance." He secured their packs to his harness and began crossing. The bridge bounced and twisted with each step, cables groaning under strain. Halfway across, he paused to demonstrate the walking technique. Small steps, knees slightly bent, arms extended for balance. When Marcus reached the opposite bank safely, Sarah's turn arrived. Her first step onto the bridge sent a bolt of fear through her body. The river churned 15 feet below, capable of sweeping her away in seconds. "Don't look down," Marcus called. "Focus on my voice and take it one step at a time." Sarah inched forward, her body rigid with tension. The twins stirred against her chest, reacting to her elevated heart rate. 3 steps in, a board creaked loudly beneath her weight. "Solid boards make more noise," Marcus assured her. "Silent ones are usually the rotten ones." This counterintuitive advice somehow helped. Sarah found rhythm, accepting the bridge's movement rather than fighting it. Halfway across, confidence grew. By the time she reached Marcus's outstretched hand, triumph mixed with relief. "Remarkable," he acknowledged, helping her onto solid ground. "Many experienced hikers freeze on that bridge." Beyond the rivers, the path climbed sharply toward Hunter's Pass. This final ascent would test their remaining strength, but success meant they'd reached the critical point, beyond which lay the relative safety of the lower elevations approaching Marcus's cabin. The approach to the pass revealed an oddity in the landscape. Stone cairns arranged in deliberate patterns, dozens of them scattered across a natural amphitheater. Each pile of rock stood waist-high, carefully balanced to withstand mountain winds. "What are these?" Sarah asked, intrigued despite her fatigue. "Memorial cairns. Each represents someone who died in these mountains. Hikers, climbers, people caught by storms, those who simply—" He paused, searching for appropriate words, "chose not to continue their journey." The sobering revelation transformed the cairns. From curious to sacred, Sarah walked carefully among them, wondering about the stories they held, the unfulfilled dreams, the families left behind, the final moments of struggle or surrender. "Your grandmother?" she asked softly, "near the far edge. My father added stones to it every year until he died. Now I do." They paid their respects before continuing, the cairns serving as silent reminders of the mountain's dual nature, both sanctuary and danger. The final push to Hunter's Pass arrived as the afternoon sun began warming the rocks. Sarah's feet moved automatically now, muscle memory developed over 2 days of intense hiking. The twins had found their rhythm too, sleeping contentedly for hours before waking to feed or be soothed. At the pass's summit, Marcus paused for the first time that day to appreciate the view rather than assess dangers. "We've made it through the worst. From here, it's manageable terrain to the cabin." Sarah joined him at the overlook. Spread below them, the valley fell away in waves of green forest, punctuated by gleaming streams and distant meadows. Smoke rose from barely visible homesteads, the first signs of human habitation they'd seen since entering the wilderness. "It's beautiful," she said, meaning more than just the view. "It can be, when you're ready to see it that way." They rested for 20 minutes, sharing the last of Marcus's trail mix and planning their approach to the cabin. As they prepared to descend, movement caught Marcus's attention, a vehicle on the distant road, moving unusually slowly for the straight section. He pulled out compact binoculars, focusing on the vehicle. After a moment, he lowered them thoughtfully. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noting his expression. "Probably nothing. Just a car driving below the speed limit. Might be tourists sightseeing. But it's a black SUV. Your ex-husband drives something similar?" Sarah's momentary peace shattered. "He has a black Range Rover. That's not what this is. Different profile entirely." Marcus packed away the binoculars. "But we should use the forest approach to the cabin anyway. Stay off the main trail." The descent took on new urgency. Marcus led them through denser woods, where the canopy blocked out much of the afternoon sun. Navigation here required expertise. The forest looked identical in all directions, with massive fir trees creating corridors that twisted and turned. "How do you know where we are?" Sarah asked after an hour of what seemed like wandering. "Landmarks you wouldn't notice. That boulder, with the split top, that's Devil's Tooth. Those 5 pines growing in perfect alignment, Pioneer's Compass. The creek that sounds different because it's flowing over specific rocks. He touched various trees as they passed. Even the bark patterns tell stories if you know how to read them. This intimate knowledge of the landscape spoke to a life spent in patient observation. Sarah found herself wondering about Marcus's isolation, whether it was choice or circumstance that kept him so removed from conventional society. As the sun angled toward the western peaks, they finally approached Marcus's property. He stopped them behind a thick stand of Douglas firs, using hand signals Sarah recognized from earlier in their journey. "The cabin has security measures," he whispered. "Motion sensors, cameras, pressure plates on the approach path. If anyone's been here, I'll know." He produced a small device from his pack, a receiver that showed green lights in careful sequence. "All systems are normal, no unexpected activity." They emerged from the trees to find the cabin nestled against a cliff face, built from local stone and weathered timber that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Solar panels gleamed on the south-facing roof, and a satellite dish suggested modern amenities hidden within the rustic exterior. "Home," Marcus announced simply, leading them to the heavy wooden door. Inside, the cabin revealed carefully planned efficiency. The main room featured a massive stone fireplace flanked by bookcases filled with guides on wilderness survival, medical reference texts, and surprisingly, classic literature. A compact kitchen occupied one corner with a manual water, pump and gas stove. Stairs led to what Sarah assumed was the sleeping loft. "There's a bassinet in storage," Marcus said, noticing her surveying for baby-appropriate surfaces. "Emily's children outgrew it 5 years ago, but it's still sound." Relief flooded through Sarah as she settled onto a handmade sofa. The twins stirred, sensing their mother's relaxation. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to fully exhale. Marcus busied himself with practical tasks, checking systems, gathering firewood, preparing a proper meal. The efficiency of his movements spoke to countless solitary evenings, following similar routines. "Why do you live this way?" Sarah asked as he chopped vegetables for soup. "It's hardly modern convenience. Modern convenience often means modern complications. Here problems are straightforward: weather, supplies, maintenance. The solutions require work, but not politics." He glanced at her. "That's not to say isolation is for everyone, but for some, especially after certain experiences, it offers clarity that crowded places don't." The soup simmered as daylight faded. Filling the cabin with warmth and the scent of herbs Marcus grew in window boxes. Sarah had expected to feel exposed in this tiny space with a near stranger, but instead found comfort in the cabin's solid walls and Marcus's steady presence. "I should contact my sister," Sarah said suddenly. "She'll be worried. I told her I was heading to California, but we agreed on a check-in schedule." Marcus produced a satellite phone. "Tomorrow. Tonight, rest. Tomorrow, we plan next steps. Contact who you need to, discuss options, maybe even sort out some legal protection." That night, settled in the sleeping loft with the twins, Sarah listened to Marcus moving about below. The cabin's sounds were foreign yet settling, wood shifting, solar batteries humming, wind moving through trees rather than man-made structures. For the first time since fleeing, Sarah allowed herself to think beyond immediate survival. The mountains had stripped away everything artificial, reduced her to essential needs and responses. What remained felt purified somehow, though she couldn't yet articulate what that meant for her future. Dawn would bring decisions, plans, perhaps confrontations, with the life she'd fled. But in this hidden place, surrounded by mountains that had tested and eventually accepted her presence, Sarah began to understand that survival itself could be a quiet triumph. Outside, the forest deepened into night's embrace. Morning would reveal whether that black SUV had been a coincidence or whether her past had somehow tracked her even here. For now, though, the cabin stood as her sanctuary, its inhabitant both guard and guide to whatever came next. Morning light filtered through hand-hewn shutters as Sarah woke to sounds she hadn't heard in years. Absolute silence punctuated only by bird calls and wind through pines. No traffic, no neighbors, no constant undercurrent of danger that had colored her life for months. The bassinet Marcus had retrieved stood beside her makeshift bed. Emma stirred, making tiny sounds that preceded her morning demands. Ethan slept on, his dark lashes casting shadows on round cheeks. Voices drifted from below, Marcus speaking to someone. Sarah's protective instincts flared until she recognized the one-sided conversation as a phone call. She couldn't make out words, but his tone carried the careful measurement she'd come to associate with his character. When she descended the ladder with Emma, Marcus was heating water on the wood stove. "Coffee or tea? I was just checking weather reports. Another system moves through tomorrow." "Coffee, please." "Who were you talking to?" "Pete Halverson. He runs the general store 45 miles down the mountain. I order supplies from him quarterly. Didn't want to miss the delivery window." The mundane explanation shouldn't have been surprising, yet Sarah realized how completely she'd been living in survival mode, where every interaction seemed potentially threatening. "I need to call my sister," she said, accepting the steaming mug. "Of course. The satellite phone works best outside, south side of the cabin. Signals clearest between 8 and 10 a.m. 30 minutes later, wrapped in one of Marcus's spare coats, Sarah dialed Melissa's number. Her sister answered on the second ring. "My God, Sarah, I've been out of my mind. You said California, but none of the tickets were used. And the police said, Brother Mel, I'm okay, we're all okay, but I couldn't use those tickets. He would have traced them. Where are you? I can't say specifically. Somewhere safe with someone who's helping us. But Mel..." Sarah paused, watching Emma trying to grab morning light streaming through tree branches. "I need to know, has he contacted you?" 3 times, first pretending concern, then angry. "Yesterday, he showed up at my apartment building. I told the doorman I wasn't available." "Sarah, he's not just looking, he's hired someone, a private investigator." The news clenched Sarah's stomach. "What kind of investigator?" "One who tracks missing persons." Richard flashed some fancy business card, acted like he was worried about your mental state, about the twins. He convinced them to check emergency room records within 300 miles of our town. And nothing, obviously. But Sarah, he's not giving up. He mentioned checking with parole officers, saying you might seek help from domestic violence. Shelters. Marcus had appeared in her peripheral vision, listening without interrupting. When Sarah ended the call 10 minutes later, he'd already begun spreading maps across his kitchen table. "What's your ex-husband's full name?" he asked. "His profession?" "Richard James Brennan. He's a portfolio manager for Crenshaw and Associates, investment firm, makes good money, has connections." Marcus pulled a laptop from a drawer, surprisingly modern technology for his rustic setting. His fingers moved across keys with practiced efficiency, found him. LinkedIn profile lists significant philanthropic work, board positions. Used his image for a charity golf tournament last month. Marcus turned the screen toward her. "This him?" Sarah's breath caught. Richard smiled from the photograph, wearing the navy suit she'd helped pick out 2 years ago. Before everything changed. Before the twins. Before his careful charm cracked. To reveal the monster beneath. Yes. The word emerged flat, emotionless. His assets suggest resources for a prolonged search. But there's something else. Marcus opened another tab. Police reports from neighboring counties. 3 women filed restraining orders against Richard Brennan in the past 4 years. All dropped the charges. He paid them off, threatened their families. Likely. But it establishes a pattern that could work in your favor. Marcus closed the laptop. We need legal protection, documentation, and a plan that accounts for his resources. Over the next 3 days, Marcus orchestrated Sarah's transition from fugitive to protected person. He contacted a lawyer in Seattle, Maria Gonzalez, who specialized in domestic violence cases involving high-profile perpetrators. Maria's handled situations like yours, Marcus explained during one of their planning sessions. Her clients include women whose abusers had political connections, law enforcement ties, or significant wealth. She knows how to counter those advantages. The twins thrived in the cabin's peaceful routine. Emma discovered how to grasp objects, focusing intensely on her fingers' newfound abilities. Ethan smiled his first real smile, not gas, Sarah determined, when Marcus spoke to him in gentle tones. On the 4th morning, Marcus's security system chimed. He moved to a monitor hidden behind a bookcase, studying displayed images from cameras positioned throughout the property. Someone's triggered the Eastern approach sensor. Not wildlife, the patterns distinctly human. Sarah felt her carefully. Built security crumble. Is it? Unknown. Single person. Moving deliberately but not furtively. Could be a lost hiker. Could be someone checking hunting boundaries. He pulled a shotgun from a hidden compartment. Stay inside, lock the door behind me. Marcus disappeared into the forest. 20 minutes stretched into an eternity. Sarah paced the cabin, the twins responding to her anxiety with their own fussiness. Every shadow beyond the windows suggested a threat. When footsteps finally approached the door, Sarah grabbed a kitchen knife, positioning herself between the entrance and her children. "It's me," Marcus called. "I'm coming in with a visitor." The door opened to reveal Marcus, accompanied by a woman perhaps 60 years old, wearing well-used hiking gear and carrying a professional-grade camera. "Sarah, this is Dr. Jennifer Wright. She's a wildlife photographer who comes through annually to document mountain fauna. We've known each other for 15 years. Dr. Wright extended her hand. "Sorry to frighten you. I'm photographing the golden eagle migration routes. Used to check in with Marcus, but lost my satellite phone in the storm last week." Relief and embarrassment flooded through Sarah simultaneously. "I'm sorry, I'm just not used to unexpected visitors being safe." Understandable. Jennifer's eyes held warmth and knowing. "I've encountered others in these mountains seeking sanctuary. The wilderness offers perspectives city life sometimes obscures." Over tea, Jennifer shared stories of mountain women who'd rebuilt lives after trauma. Some remained hidden, others eventually returned to society stronger. Each found their own path to healing. "I have something for you," Jennifer said before leaving. She produced a small stone pendant carved with symbols. "Local artisan makes these, represents transformation through adversity," seemed appropriate. After Jennifer's departure, Marcus revealed another development. "I contacted an old friend in the Marshal Service. Off the record, she's aware that certain individuals require assistance outside official channels. And she'll review your case. If warranted, she can help arrange new identities, relocate you beyond Richard's reach. But Sarah—" Marcus paused, choosing words carefully. "That's a permanent decision. Once made, returning to your old life becomes nearly impossible." The weight of choice settled over her. These mountains had demanded everything false be stripped away. Now she faced the authentic cost of freedom, severing ties with her past identity to ensure her children's future safety. That night, while the twins slept, Sarah stood on the cabin's porch, watching stars undimmed by city lights. Marcus joined her, offering a blanket against the mountain chill. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. "Always. That black SUV from yesterday, did you ever identify it?" Pete mentioned a rental vehicle was reported stolen from the agency in Glenwood Springs. Matches the description. They found it abandoned near the mountain base. You think? I think someone matching your description was asking about hiking. Trails 2 days ago, same direction we traveled. Marcus paused. I've increased security measures. Motion-activated lights, additional cameras. If he's followed you this far, he's determined. But these mountains protect their own. The revelation should have terrified her. Instead, Sarah felt strangely calm. I won't run forever. No one expects, you two, but timing matters. Facing him now unprepared helps no one, especially not Emma and Ethan. Inside, Emma woke up with a cry. Sarah returned to tend her daughter, but Ethan surprised them by sleeping through his sister's demands. Small victories in adjusting to their new reality. The following morning brought Maria Gonzalez to the cabin. She'd driven the 4 hours from Seattle, navigating mountain roads most wouldn't attempt. Her arrival reassured Sarah. Here was someone who understood both legal complexities and the lengths protective mothers would go. I've reviewed what Marcus sent, Maria began, spreading legal documents across the table. Richard's behavior follows textbook patterns. The investigators tracked your bus ticket purchases to San Francisco, but they don't have records of your mountain activities. Paid cash for everything after the tickets, Sarah confirmed. Smart. Here's what I propose. We file comprehensive documentation while you're in hiding. Restraining orders, custody petitions, everything needed for when, if, you choose to resurface. Legally. Additionally, we create a paper trail establishing Richard's history of abuse and the specific threats that prompted your flight. How do we prove the threats? Hospital records from when he shook Emma. Your doctor noted unexplained bruising on both you and the infant. Combined with police reports from his other victims, we build a pattern. The legal strategy session continued for hours. Maria's thoroughness impressed Sarah, every contingency considered, every possible attack avenue anticipated. One thing concerns me, Maria admitted toward the end. Richard has filed a missing persons report claiming you're suffering from postpartum depression with psychotic features. He's positioned himself as the worried husband trying to save his unstable wife. That's completely true or false doesn't matter yet. He's creating a narrative that could discredit you if you surface without proper documentation. We need medical evaluations from reputable professionals stating your mental health is sound, that you made rational decisions to protect your children. Marcus had been quiet throughout, observing the legal maneuvering. Now he spoke. I know. Someone in Denver, retired FBI psychiatrist who consults on custody cases. She could come here, assess Sarah in a neutral environment. Perfect, Maria agreed. Dr. Catherine Chen. Yes. You know her? By reputation. Her evaluations hold significant weight in court. The planning continued as afternoon light slanted. Through trees, Sarah found herself both overwhelmed and supported. These strangers, mountain guardian, legal warrior, potential evaluator, were constructing a bridge from terror to security. That evening, after Maria departed and the twins settled, for the night, Sarah found Marcus tending the cabin's small garden. He'd explained that growing herb gardens served dual purposes, culinary and medicinal needs. Thank you, she said simply. For the garden, for everything. For seeing us in that valley, for helping without hesitation, for knowing exactly what kind of assistance we needed. Marcus looked up from pruning sage plants. 3 years ago I hesitated helping someone. Spent 2 days debating whether involvement meant responsibility. By the time I acted, it was too late. They were found dead in Miller's Gulch. Exposure, hypothermia, could have been prevented. That's why you help now? Guilt? Obligation. These mountains demand respect, but also offer redemption. If I have skills that can prevent tragedy, refusing to use them makes me complicit in the outcome. The philosophy aligned with observations Sarah had made about Marcus's character. He didn't merely survive in this wilderness. He embraced responsibility for those it attracted. Stars emerged as they talked, the Milky Way visible in ways impossible near city lights. Sarah learned that Marcus named constellations not by astronomical designations but by personal stories. The lost hunter, three sisters swimming, grandmother's quilt. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked. "Solitude isn't loneliness when you understand your purpose." "And what's your purpose?" "Currently, ensuring you and your children reach safety. Beyond that?" He gestured at the surrounding landscape. "Being the bridge between those who need these mountains and the sanctuary they offer." His words carried the weight of vocation rather than mere occupation. Sarah understood she'd stumbled into the orbit of someone who'd found meaning in service to others' survival. The next 2 weeks established routines that almost felt normal. Dr. Chen arrived as promised, spending 3 days conducting thorough psychological evaluations. Her gentle manner put Sarah at ease, and she interacted naturally with the twins, making clinical observations without intrusive procedures. "Your responses indicate someone making rational, protective decisions under extreme duress," Dr. Chen concluded. "No evidence of impaired mental status, only appropriate fear responses to documented threats." The evaluation would become crucial evidence if legal proceedings ensued. Meanwhile, signs suggested Richard's investigation continued. Pete reported strangers asking questions in town about unusual purchases, women with young children, mountain guides who might help people disappear. "He's casting a wider net," Marcus analyzed. "But these mountains hold thousands of hiding places. Without specific coordinates, he's searching for shadows." On a sunny afternoon, when the twins napped peacefully, Sarah ventured outside alone for the first time. Marcus had established specific boundaries within which she could wander safely, areas his cameras covered, where cell coverage allowed emergency contact. She walked familiar trails now, recognizing landmarks Marcus had taught her to identify. The forest had transformed from threatening maze to protective cocoon. She could name local birds by their calls, identify edible plants from poisonous varieties, read weather signs in cloud formations. At a clearing overlooking a valley spreading green and gold to distant peaks, Sarah faced a truth emerging through mountain clarity. Her escape hadn't just been from Richard's violence. She'd been fleeing the person that environment had forced her to become, small, fearful, constantly. Performing safety for an unpredictable audience. These mountains demanded authenticity. Face the cliff or fall, find water or perish, care for your children or leave none to care for. Strip away pretense revealed unexpected strength. When she returned to the cabin, Marcus was working on his journal, updating maps with winter condition. "Changes." He looked up at her entrance. "You've decided," he observed. "Not a question." "About?" "Whatever you needed the mountain silence to clarify." Sarah settled at the table. "I need to face him, eventually. Not run, not hide indefinitely, but confront what happened legally and properly. With resources and documentation, yes. Build the strongest possible case for keeping Emma and Ethan safe. Full custody, restraining orders, whatever it takes." Marcus continued sketching topographical details. "When you're ready?" "Not yet." She watched him work, appreciating the steady capability that allowed no panic or rush. "First, I need to become someone capable of that fight. Someone stronger than the woman who fled into these mountains." That woman was already strong, Marcus. Corrected. She protected her children against overwhelming odds, adapted to unfamiliar dangers, trusted when trust seemed impossible. The mountains don't create strength, they reveal it. His words struck the truth Sarah hadn't recognized. Through the crisis, she'd accessed reserves she'd forgotten existed. That night, as she rocked Ethan back to sleep after a feeding, Sarah studied her reflection in the window's glass. The frightened woman who'd stumbled into Devil's Trap still existed somewhere, but the emerging being, capable, clear-sighted, determined, had always waited beneath manufactured fears. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Maria had discovered additional complexities in Richard's investigation. Surveillance equipment ordered, suspicious expense reports suggesting extended travel. The hunt continued, but now Sarah had resources beyond desperation. Outside, a wolf called to its mate, the sound carrying across valleys thick with ancient secrets. 2 months ago, that call would have terrified her. Now it spoke of wild things, finding their strength, their purpose, their place in the uncompromising mountain night. The twins slept soundly, secure in their makeshift nursery. Marcus maintained watch from the main room, his presence a steady reminder that even in isolation, protection came dressed in unexpected forms. Sarah dozed fitfully, dreaming of courtrooms and confrontations, but also of hiking higher peaks with her children when they were older, teaching them to read weather signs and identify safe passage through challenging terrain. Dawn approached another day of preparation, another step toward whatever waited beyond these protective peaks. The mountains had stripped away everything. False. What remained would face whatever came next with hard-earned clarity. The 6th week in the mountains arrived with the first snowfall, delicate flakes that caught morning light like suspended diamonds. Sarah stood at the window, Emma against her hip, watching the transformation of their protected world into something even more remote. "Winter's early this year," Marcus observed, joining her with steaming coffee. "Usually it doesn't hit until late October. Does that change our timeline? It makes Richard's search more difficult, but also complicates your eventual departure." He pointed toward the mountain passes visible from the cabin. "Those roads will be impassable within weeks. Once heavy snow hits, we're fully isolated until spring." The previous night, Maria had called with news that shifted their strategy. "Richard's narrative has gained traction," she'd reported, her voice crackling through the satellite connection. "He convinced Child Protective Services to open an investigation. Claims you abducted the children during a mental health crisis." Sarah had felt the familiar weight of powerlessness until Maria continued, "But I've counterfiled with evidence of the abuse pattern and detailed documentation of his intimidation tactics against other women. The CPS investigator assigned to the case, Patricia Morales, has handled similar situations. She's skeptical of Richard's claims, but bound by protocol to investigate." Now, watching snow accumulate on pine branches, Sarah considered the implications. Winter isolation meant Richard couldn't reach them physically, but it also meant they couldn't easily access legal support if needed. Marcus had anticipated this challenge. "I've contacted a satellite internet provider. Equipment arrives tomorrow, weather permitting. We'll have limited bandwidth, but enough for video conferences with lawyers, virtual depositions if necessary." His foresight continued to impress her. While she'd planned her escape in panic, Marcus operated from comprehensive knowledge of both wilderness survival and modern legal needs. The twins marked their 4th month with noticeable development. Emma had discovered her feet, grabbing toes. With determined curiosity, Ethan tracked movement with intense focus, his dark eyes following every shadow across cabin walls. "They're adapting differently," Sarah mentioned during their morning routine. "Emma demands constant stimulation. Ethan studies everything quietly first." "Complementary personalities often develop in twins," Marcus offered, demonstrating impressive knowledge of child development. Nature's way of ensuring diverse survival skills. His casual expertise spanned unexpected areas. Former Boy Scout, EMT training, some legal education from helping his sister through her divorce. He'd gathered knowledge like others collected. Stamps, methodically, purposefully, storing each skill for future necessity. On the 9th day of snow, Martha Brennan, Richard's mother, made contact through Maria. The call came at sunset, when mountain light painted everything in amber tones. "She claims she's been worried about you," Maria explained. Says Richard has become obsessed with finding you, that his behavior concerns her. She wants to help. She's never helped before, Sarah responded, bitterness creeping into her voice. She witnessed his father's abuse for 30 years, taught Richard that wives were property to manage. People change perspective sometimes, but we should be cautious. She could be gathering information for Richard. Marcus had entered silently, listening to the one-sided conversation. When Sarah ended the call, he posed a question that had clearly been developing. What would it take for you to believe she's genuine? Actions, concrete assistance, not words. 2 days later, that assistance materialized in an unexpected form. Martha had contacted the private investigator directly, Preston Howell, with documentation of Richard's history that she'd secretly compiled. Hospital records from when Richard was 12 and pushed his sister downstairs. Juvenile court records are sealed but accessible to family. Notes from a therapist who'd warned Martha that her son exhibited sociopathic tendencies. She's just sent everything to Maria, Marcus relayed, ending another satellite call, including something more significant, documentation that Richard has been prescribed medication for anger management and paranoid tendencies. He stopped taking it 6 months ago, told everyone he was cured. The information reshuffled legal strategies. Maria began building a comprehensive picture of Richard's psychological instability, countering his claims about Sarah's mental state with evidence of his own untreated conditions. Winter deepened its grip on the mountain. The new internet satellite allowed connection to the outside world, though weather often interrupted signals. Sarah attended virtual therapy sessions with Dr. Chen, continued legal meetings with Maria, and began researching child development resources online. She'd transformed the cabin's sleeping loft into a makeshift nursery and office. The twins shared the restored antique bassinet, while Sarah worked on a converted desk that Marcus had crafted from reclaimed wood. The arrangement felt temporary yet comfortable, a liminal space between fleeing and settling. One evening, while Marcus prepared dinner and the twins dozed, Sarah discovered something significant in Richard's online presence. She'd been conducting periodic searches, not for news of herself, but to understand his public narrative. "Marcus," she called down, "you should see this." He climbed the ladder to find her laptop displaying Richard's firm's website. His profile photo had been updated. No longer the confident professional pose, but something grayer, more gaunt. "When was this changed?" Marcus asked. 2 weeks ago, according to the metadata. Look at the About section. Richard's biography now included a poignant addition. Richard has taken leave to address a family situation. Our thoughts are with him during this challenging time. Controlled publicity, Marcus analyzed, maintaining the concerned father's image while the investigation continues. But look at his eyes in the photo. He seems diminished. People who control through intimidation often struggle when that control vanishes. He can't frighten you from a distance, can't manipulate what he can't reach. The observation offered Sarah unexpected satisfaction. For so long, she'd carried Richard's power with her. The fear of his reach, the anticipation of his rage. Distance had revealed what abuse victims often couldn't see, the abuser's fundamental weakness when confronted with boundaries. November progressed with preparations for potential winter isolation. Marcus taught Sarah to maintain the solar system, operate backup generators, monitor weather forecasting equipment, practical skills that built competency alongside legal strategy. Their most significant breakthrough came on a bright afternoon when Maria called with unexpected news. "Patricia Morales wants to meet with you. Virtual interview first, then possibly in person, if weather permits." "The CPS investigator?" "Yes. She's reviewed all documentation and has some questions, but her tone suggests she's finding inconsistencies in Richard's claims. Apparently, he presented a medical report diagnosing you with severe postpartum psychosis. When she asked for the doctor's credentials, he became evasive. The virtual interview was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Chen would participate to provide expert assessment if needed. Meanwhile, Jennifer Wright returned unexpectedly, having decided to winter in the mountains for extended wildlife photography. Her presence added another layer of normality to their isolated community. "I've documented 3 different wolf packs this season," she shared during dinner. "One has adopted unusual hunting patterns, probably learned from watching human hikers." Her stories of animal adaptation paralleled Sarah's own journey. Survival required flexibility, learning from unexpected sources, accepting help while maintaining vigilance. The twins celebrated their 4th month with visible milestones. Emma rolled over for the first time, achieving the feat with determined concentration. Ethan responded with his first laugh, a clear, joyful sound prompted by Marcus playing peekaboo. "They're thriving here," Jennifer observed. "Amazing how quickly infants adapt to the environment when caregivers are stable." Her comment held subtle wisdom. Despite uncertainty about the future, Sarah had created stability through routine, care, and the support of people who'd rallied unexpectedly to protect them. The night before the CPS interview, Sarah discovered she couldn't sleep. She ventured downstairs to find Marcus reading by firelight, a collection of poetry that seemed incongruous with his survivalist image. "Can't quiet your mind?" he asked, gesturing to a chair. "Tomorrow feels significant." "It is. But you're prepared. You have truth and documentation on your side." They sat in companionable silence for a time, fire crackling, snow whispering against windows. Finally, Sarah voiced something that had been developing. "When this is over, when the legal situation resolves, I don't think I'll return to who I was before." "Why would you want to?" The question struck deeply. The woman who'd married Richard, who'd accepted gradually escalating abuse, who'd convinced herself that stability mattered more than safety, that person hadn't been particularly admirable. "The mountains teach harsh lessons," Marcus mused, "but honest ones. Strip away who you think you should be to discover who you actually are." His words echoed thoughts Sarah had been forming but couldn't articulate. These months in isolation had revealed strengths she'd forgotten, capabilities she'd doubted, a determination she'd suppressed under years of psychological manipulation. The interview the next morning proceeded better than expected. Patricia Morales appeared on screen as a professional woman in her 40s, radiating competence and fairness. Her questions were thorough, but not interrogative. "I've reviewed all the documentation," she began. "The discrepancies in Mr. Brennan's narrative are concerning. The doctor who allegedly diagnosed your postpartum psychosis isn't licensed in this state. When I contacted him, he claimed he'd never met you." Relief flooded through Sarah. "I was never diagnosed with anything except a normal postpartum adjustment period by my real physician. I have those records. They support your account entirely." Patricia leaned forward. "I'm particularly troubled by evidence suggesting Mr. Brennan may have fabricated medical documentation. That constitutes fraud and undermines his credibility significantly." The interview concluded with Patricia requesting permission to visit in person if weather allowed. "I need to verify the children's wellness personally, document your living conditions, complete the investigation properly." After ending the call, Sarah felt a shift, from defensive positioning to proactive advocacy. Maria had been right to pursue comprehensive documentation. Truth, combined with evidence, created a foundation from which to rebuild their lives. That afternoon, while the twins napped and snowflakes fell steadily, Sarah found herself in conversation with Jennifer about Future plans beyond the immediate crisis. Have you considered what you want long-term? Jennifer asked while sorting through photographs. Safety, security, a life where Emma and Ethan can grow without fear. But where? These mountains have given you sanctuary, but is isolation your ultimate goal? The question prompted deeper reflection. Sarah had been so focused on escaping danger that she hadn't contemplated what peace might look like. I studied early childhood education, she admitted, before Richard convinced me my career was unnecessary. Part of me thinks about creating something positive from this experience, maybe helping other women whose children are at risk. The lessons you've learned here could benefit others, Jennifer agreed. Mountain survival skills, legal advocacy, psychological resilience, you've acquired quite a toolbox. Her words sparked something. What if healing didn't require remaining hidden, but rather transforming trauma into purpose? The following days brought developments on multiple fronts. Martha Brennan continued providing evidence against her son, including recordings of threatening voicemails he'd left her when she questioned his version of events. The investigators' report detailed Richard's elaborate deception attempts, fake medical records, altered emails, attempts to access Sarah's medical history through questionable means. Meanwhile, winter settled more deeply. The predicted storm system arrived with dramatic intensity, dropping temperatures below freezing and accumulating snow that transformed the landscape into monochromatic beauty. Roads became impassable, but the cabin remained secure. Marcus's preparations proved exceptional. Enough supplies for 6 months, alternative power sources, comprehensive medical equipment. On Christmas Eve, an unexpected call came through on the satellite phone. Sarah answered to find her sister, Melissa, sobbing. Sarah, thank God. Richard came to the house again. This time he had his lawyer. They're threatening to sue for custody, claiming you're unstable. But Mom stood up to him. Mom did what? She heard about the twins, drove 12 hours to my house. When Richard showed up, she told him she's testifying against him if he pursues this. Said she'd witnessed him shake Emma, that she has photos of your bruises from previous incidents. The news rendered Sarah speechless. Her mother had always been passive, preferring peace to confrontation. This unexpected alliance shifted family. Dynamics Sarah thought were fixed. There's more, Melissa continued. The private investigator quit, apparently found evidence that disturbed him enough to refuse further employment. Richard's unraveling. After the call, Sarah shared the developments. With Marcus, they were preparing the twins for bed, a routine that had become comfortable and familiar. Your support network is expanding, Marcus observed, lifting Ethan for his nighttime feeding. Sometimes a crisis reveals who people truly are, both the loyal and the deceptive. That night, Sarah experienced something she'd thought lost forever, hope without fear. The twins slept peacefully. Outside, snow created a protective curtain. Inside, fire and safety enveloped them. She stood at the window, Emma dozing against her shoulder, considering the path forward. Legal proceedings would likely continue through winter. Spring would bring decisions about settlement versus emergence into public life. But for now, in this mountain sanctuary, Sarah recognized that survival had evolved into sanctuary, and sanctuary was transforming into strength. The woman who'd stumbled into these peaks carrying infants and fear had discovered resources, both internal and external, that could sustain whatever came next. Marcus appeared beside her, coffee in hand. Snow's supposed to continue through tomorrow. Good, she replied, surprising herself with the response. Good? It feels like protection. She adjusted Emma's position. Like the mountains are giving us time to prepare properly. Perhaps they are. They stood together, watching snow fall in the protected mountain night, understanding that isolation had become transformation, and that whatever challenges waited beyond the peaks, they would face them with strength forged in wilderness. Winters. Grasp tightened as January arrived. bringing uncharacteristic weather patterns that even Marcus found noteworthy. Temperatures dropped to record lows, while snow accumulated in depths unseen for decades. The cabin became an island of warmth in a landscape of fierce beauty. Through the satellite link, Maria delivered news that shifted their understanding of Richard's situation. "His firm has placed him on indefinite leave," she reported one grey morning. Apparently, his behavior during meetings became increasingly erratic. Paranoid accusations against colleagues, claims that everyone was conspiring against him. "Is he getting help?" Sarah asked, aware that some part of her still cared about his well-being, if only for closure. His mother tried to convince him to seek treatment. He refused, calling her a traitor. The last confirmed sighting was 3 days ago in Denver, purchasing wilderness equipment. Marcus's expression darkened. "What kind of equipment?" "Mountaineering gear. Cold-weather camping supplies, GPS tracking devices." The implication hung heavy in the cabin's air. Sarah instinctively moved closer to the twins' play area, where Emma practiced sitting while Ethan watched his sister's efforts with solemn concentration. "Could he actually find this place?" Jennifer asked, having joined them for breakfast. "Difficult but not impossible," Marcus admitted. "If he's acquired advanced tracking equipment and has narrowed the search zone." He pulled out topographical maps, spreading them across the table. "There are maybe 30 locations within a 100-mile radius where someone could safely maintain a cabin off-grid. And he'd search each one. Depends on his mental state." Obsession can drive people to extraordinary efforts. Over the following week, Marcus intensified security measures. He installed additional cameras along lesser-known approaches to the property, established early warning systems that would alert them to any human presence within a 5-mile radius, even procured a bear-proof communication bunker 50 yards from the cabin, a fallback position if confrontation became unavoidable. Sarah found herself studying wilderness survival with new dedication. She learned to operate the cabin's security systems independently, memorized emergency protocols, practiced different escape routes with the twins in carriers designed for swift evacuation. "Knowledge isn't just power," Marcus instructed during one of their training sessions. "It's confidence. Fear often comes from feeling helpless. Understanding your options reduces that fear." The training proved accurate. As weeks passed without incident, Sarah's initial anxiety transformed into vigilant awareness. She could read subtle changes in the environment, unusual bird behavior that might signal intruders, tracks in snow that revealed animal versus human passage, weather patterns that would favor or hinder potential approaches. Mid-January brought an event that tested everyone's resilience. During a routine supply check, Marcus discovered their main generator had developed a serious mechanical issue. Repairing it required parts available only from the specialized supplier in Seattle, a journey impossible during peak winter. "We can maintain on solar and the backup generator," Marcus calculated, examining inventory lists. "But if something happens to the backup, we'll be limited to candles and the fireplace for heat. That's survivable but challenging with twins." Sarah surprised herself by already formulating solutions. "We could reduce electricity usage for non-essential items, create schedules for computer access, limit heating to the main room and sleeping loft. I researched winter feeding schedules when we first arrived. The twins can manage with temperature variations better than we think." Her suggestions impressed even Marcus. The frightened woman who'd stumbled into these mountains 6 months ago had internalized survival principles that many never grasped after years of outdoor experience. The adaptation worked. They established routines that balanced comfort with conservation. Sarah discovered she could manage the twins' needs with minimal, modern conveniences, drawing on knowledge about infant care that predated electricity. The experience taught both independence and the flexible definition of necessity. February arrived with an unexpected development. Sarah's mother sought direct contact. The call came through late evening, when mountain silence was absolute, except for wind through pine branches. "Sarah, baby, is that you?" Her mother's voice carried decades of worry and reluctance. "I'm sorry. I should have protected you years ago, should have seen what Richard was becoming." The conversation lasted 2 hours. Margaret Walsh described the family meeting, where she'd finally confronted the silence surrounding Sarah's marriage. How she'd driven to Melissa's house, prepared to wait indefinitely for Sarah's call. The shock of learning about the twins, the guilt of missed years. "Your father suspected," Margaret confessed. "Before he died, he told me to watch Richard carefully, said there was something in his eyes that reminded him of men he'd served with who came back from war changed. I didn't listen. Thought he was being paranoid. You couldn't have known. A mother should know." The statement trembled with regret. "I have something for you. Letters. Your father wrote them before he died. One for each birthday he knew he'd miss. They're being held by his attorney. Would you want them when you're ready?" The offer broke something loose in Sarah. Tears. She'd been storing since fleeing, grief postponed for survival's sake. Marcus had withdrawn discreetly, taking the twins downstairs to afford her privacy. When she descended later, face streaked with evidence of emotion, Marcus simply offered coffee and quiet presence. No questions, no forced comfort, just acceptance of whatever processing she needed. "Family can heal or harm," he said, after lengthy silence. "Sometimes they do both through the same actions." The twins had developed new abilities during winters. Isolation. Emma now crawled with determined speed, investigating every corner of the cabin that her safety allowed. Ethan had discovered laughter, responding especially to physical play and silly sounds. Sarah found herself photographing their milestones obsessively, digital documentation that felt both preservative and protective. These memories would exist beyond winter, beyond hiding, beyond whatever confrontation awaited their emergence from sanctuary. Martha Brennan's assistance continued proving invaluable. She'd contacted Richard's previous therapist, the one who'd warned about sociopathic tendencies, and convinced her to provide expert testimony if custody proceedings advanced. Additionally, Martha had found evidence of Richard's financial irregularities, misappropriated client funds, hidden through complex investment structures. "He's built a house of cards," Maria summarized during a case review. "Financial fraud, fabricated medical evidence, history of abuse. But houses of cards sometimes collapse violently. We need to be prepared for desperate actions." One crystalline morning in late February, Marcus's security system activated. Something had triggered the outermost perimeter sensor, a presence where none should be in weather this severe. He reviewed camera feeds while Sarah prepared the twins for potential evacuation. The footage revealed a lone figure, moving with difficulty through deep snow, following the canyon road that most travelers avoided. "It could be a lost hiker," Marcus said, though his expression suggested otherwise. They watched the figure's progress for 2 hours. Movement patterns indicated familiarity with outdoor navigation, suggesting this wasn't accidental wandering. The person carried professional equipment, wore high-end winter gear suitable for extended mountain survival. When the figure finally turned toward the cabin's location, despite following a route that most would consider impassable, Marcus made a decision. "It's him," he stated firmly. "The way he moves, the equipment choice, the persistence on this particular path. What do? We control the encounter. He's still miles away, fighting the terrain. I can reach our observation point before he clears the canyon. From there, I'll assess his intentions and state of mind." Marcus prepared methodically, weapons secured but accessible, communication devices tested, emergency protocols reviewed with Sarah. He'd constructed a series of signals that would inform her of developments without alerting any potential adversary. If you see two flares locked down completely, that means immediate danger, he instructed. 3 flares means I need backup. Follow the secondary route to Jenny's winter site. 1 flare repeated means all clear. After Marcus departed, Sarah implemented defensive measures. She moved the twins to the cabin's most secure area, a reinforced interior room originally designed for tornado protection. Their travel documents, essential supplies, and backup power sources were staged for rapid access. Jennifer arrived within the hour, having been alerted by their emergency communication system. Together, they maintained careful watch while trying to maintain normalcy for the children, who seemed to sense the heightened tension. Your children are remarkably resilient, Jennifer observed as they prepared midday meals. They've adapted to stress better than many adults I've known. They don't know what normal looks like yet, Sarah replied. For them, this is reality. 2 hours after Marcus's departure, a single flare burst against the grey sky. All clear. But 15 minutes later, 2 more flares followed in rapid succession. Lockdown, Jennifer confirmed. I'll get the emergency protocol started. Sarah gathered the twins, her training taking over despite fear constricting her throat. They were prepared for this scenario. The cabin had hidden chambers, escape tunnels, backup plans layered upon contingencies. But as she entered the protected room with her children, Sarah realized something had fundamentally changed. She wasn't the terrified woman who'd fled into these mountains. She'd gained knowledge, skills, support systems that transformed terror into focused action. Through the security monitors, they tracked movement patterns outside. Marcus appeared first, moving with calculated stealth. Behind him, at considerable distance, followed the figure Sarah recognized as Richard. He looked different than in his office photos. Beard rough and uneven, clothing practical rather than polished. Movement suggesting both determination and fatigue. But the recognition wasn't what held Sarah's attention. It was watching Marcus, the man who'd been her unexpected guardian, prepare to confront the source of her flight. His stance spoke of readiness without aggression, protection without threat. He'd positioned himself at a bend in the path, where he controlled visibility and escape routes. When Richard finally reached the position, the confrontation began without immediate violence. Through the cabin's thermal imaging system, they could see the 2 men facing each other, engaged in what appeared to be conversation. The standoff lasted 30 minutes. Twice, Richard moved as if to advance. Each time, Marcus's response halted him without observable force. The body language suggested Marcus had engaged Richard in discussion rather than confrontation. Finally, Richard turned back down the path he'd climbed. Marcus remained in position for another hour before signaling all clear and returning to the cabin. "What happened?" Sarah asked as he entered, tension evident in her voice. He tracked down leads through equipment purchases, cross-referenced weather. Data narrowed locations based on isolation factors, Marcus explained, accepting coffee from Jennifer. He's more rational than his recent behavior suggested, calculating even. But he left. After I presented him with copies of all the evidence Maria has compiled, medical records proving he falsified documents, financial crimes Patricia Morales discovered during her investigation, his mother's testimony, the cumulative weight was sobering. He could return. Unlikely during winter conditions. The effort to reach here nearly defeated him, and he now understands the legal consequences awaiting him if he continues harassment. Sarah processed this information while watching Emma attempt to feed herself with chubby fists. Richard had come searching, but found reality instead of the narrative he'd created. "There's something else," Marcus added. He asked about the twins, not demanding to see them or claiming rights, asked if they were healthy, safe, being cared for properly. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. They're thriving under their mother's Protection, that whatever he might once have been to them, his actions have defined their current reality. The encounter marked a turning point. Richard's ability to locate them, even defeated by circumstance, meant continued isolation wasn't indefinitely sustainable. Moreover, the confrontation had revealed his capacity for rational thought alongside destructive behavior. Over the following days, multiple developments converged. Patricia Morales completed her investigation with findings entirely supportive of Sarah's account. Martha Brennan convinced Richard to enter intensive therapy, threatening to testify against him publicly if he refused. Maria structured a custody arrangement that protected the twins, while allowing supervised visitation if Richard demonstrated sustained treatment success. "Spring will bring choices," Maria summarized during an evening conference call. "You can remain hidden or work within the system we've constructed. The evidence we've gathered creates significant legal protection." That night, after the twins settled and Jennifer had retired to the guest cabin, Sarah found Marcus updating his journals, the detailed records that documented mountain history, personal observations, and now the story of her family's sanctuary. "Do you ever regret the isolation?" she asked him. "These mountains chose me as much as I chose them. Every life has purpose. Mine seems to be providing bridge between refuge and resolution. And when the bridge building ends, new situations bring new opportunities for service. Your story won't be the last of these mountain shelters." They sat in comfortable silence, firelight playing across maps and memories. Outside, winter continued its ancient rhythm, protecting and preserving those it embraced. Sarah understood now that sanctuary wasn't a permanent state, but a transition, a space for healing that prepared one for inevitable emergence. The twins would carry no memory of this mountain winter, but its lessons would shape the life she could now confidently rebuild. 3 days later, a break in weather brought Pete's long-delayed supply delivery. Along with provisions came mail, including a package from Margaret Walsh containing the letters Sarah's father had written before his death. She opened the first one alone in the sleeping loft, reading words crafted by the man who'd suspected the truth about Richard years ago. His letter for her missing birthday spoke of strength inherited, courage sometimes requiring solitude, and the importance of creating safety for future generations. "You may never read this in hiding," he'd written. "But if you do, know that choosing protection over performance takes more bravery than most will ever understand." His words affirmed choices already made. As winter's grip began loosening its hold on the mountain peaks, Sarah recognized that the woman who would descend from this sanctuary carried wisdom earned through necessity and strength, forged in isolation. 2. Twins stirred from afternoon naps, their waking sounds, familiar now as heartbeats, calling her back to present purpose. Whatever lay beyond winter's protective embrace, they would face it together, equipped with more than mere survival. Outside, ravens called from snow-laden pines, their voices echoing through valleys that had witnessed countless stories of refuge and return. Sarah answered their call with quiet confidence, understanding at last that Sanctuary's gift wasn't shelter from life's storms, but strength to navigate them. March arrived with the mountain's seasonal identity crisis, snow lingering in shadows, while southern slopes revealed patches of emerging earth. The cabin's rhythms shifted as sunlight extended its daily reach, and the twins responded to nature's awakening with increased activity. Sarah's transformation had become complete in ways she'd never anticipated. Her hands, once smooth from office, work and manicures, now bore honorable scars from firewood splitting and mountain traversing. Her body, shaped by necessity into something stronger than her gym-sculpted former self, moved with confidence through terrain that would have terrified her 7 months ago. The custody mediation is scheduled for April 15th, Maria announced during a morning call. Richards admitted himself to a residential treatment facility. His therapist believes 6 weeks might produce meaningful behavioral modification. And if it doesn't, we've structured the agreement with escalating protections, supervised visitation, builds to overnight stays only after sustained, demonstrated progress and child welfare assessments. Sarah considered this while watching Emma attempt to stack wooden blocks Marcus had carved. The twins would be 8 months old by mediation date, no longer the vulnerable newborns she'd fled with, but developing individuals with interests and personalities. Is he required to attend? Participation shows good faith, but we can proceed without him. That's actually been our strategy, building an airtight case that stands regardless of his involvement. After ending the call, Sarah found herself drawn to the cabin's window overlooking the valley. Spring's advance wasn't just environmental. It represented decisions crystallizing into action. "I've decided," she announced when Marcus emerged from his workshop. "We'll leave after the mediation, regardless of outcome." He nodded, unsurprised. "The mountains teach timing as much as survival. You can read when seasons change." The following week brought unexpected visitors. Patricia Morales made the difficult journey to conduct final welfare checks. She arrived accompanied by a child psychologist specializing in infant development assessments. "Your children are thriving," Dr. William Chen observed after extensive evaluation. "Physical development, typical for their age. Social responses within normal ranges. Attachment patterns secure. Their adaptability suggests excellent primary caregiving." Patricia reviewed every aspect of their mountain life: emergency systems, medical supplies, developmental stimulation, social interaction via Jennifer's visits. Her report would be comprehensive in supporting Sarah's competent parenting. "I must admit," Patricia confessed during her departure, "I expected to find a desperate woman hiding children in isolation. Instead, I find someone who's built a secure environment through extraordinary circumstances." Her words validated choices Sarah had questioned countless times. The mountain retreat hadn't been a failure to engage with society, but strategic positioning for eventual, healthy reintegration. As winter's final storms swept through the peaks, Sarah began teaching skills back to Marcus, surprising them both. Her research into child development translated into creating enrichment activities from forest materials. Her photography documented not just memories, but also evidence of the twins' consistent care. "You've become the teacher," Marcus acknowledged, one evening while Sarah organized their supply inventory. 7 months ago, you couldn't identify pine from fir. Now you're lecturing me on optimal stack heights for firewood drying. 7 months ago, I was running blind. Now I see where I'm going." The statement carried layers of meaning. Vision had returned, not just for survival, but for designing the life she wanted beyond sanctuary. Final preparations for departure began as snow softened into spring mud. Marcus helped Sarah establish bank accounts untraceable to Richard, secure rental agreements in Portland, where she'd decided to resettle, and create support networks through organizations assisting domestic violence survivors. "Why Portland?" Jennifer asked during one of their last dinners together. "Distance from his sphere, but close enough to family support," Sarah explained. "Julia, my college roommate, runs a children's advocacy center there. She's offered housing until I establish independence." The twins would have their first birthday in a real home, not hiding in mountains, but building futures in community. Richard's facility provided weekly progress reports. His therapist noted breakthrough moments alongside setbacks. During the Fifth week, he requested permission to write a letter. Sarah debated for 2 days before agreeing. The letter arrived via secure courier, screened by Maria first. It contained no threats, no manipulations, just acknowledgement of harm caused, acceptance of consequences, and what might have been genuine remorse. "I won't see this during mediation," Sarah decided after reading it twice. His words aren't what matters now. His actions going forward will tell the real story. 3 days before the scheduled departure, the mountain delivered an unexpected lesson in gratitude. During morning chores, Sarah slipped on wet stone, twisting her ankle severely. The injury would have been catastrophic during her arrival months, but now triggered an efficient response. Marcus splinted the sprain, while Sarah managed the twins. Jennifer temporarily assumed supply runs. The community they'd created absorbed the crisis without panic. This is what Sanctuary created, Sarah reflected that evening, elevated foot-wrapped while Emma played nearby. Not just survival skills, but trust in others' capabilities. Every teacher eventually becomes a student to what they've built, Marcus replied, brewing therapeutic tea from herbs he'd cultivated. The morning of departure arrived sunny and crisp, April's gift of perfect traveling weather. The twins, dressed in clothes Maria had shipped ahead, looked more substantial than the infants Sarah had carried into these mountains. Pete had arranged special transport, a modified 4-wheel drive capable of navigating late winter conditions. The drive to civilization would take 8 hours, stopping overnight before continuing to Portland. As Sarah packed final items, Marcus presented a gift, his comprehensive journal from their 7 months together. "Your story," he explained simply. "Sometimes we need to see where we've been to understand where we're going." The weight of the leather-bound volume felt significant beyond mere pages. Inside lay evidence of transformation most people never attempted, proof that when necessity demanded, ordinary people discovered extraordinary capability. At the departure point, Jennifer had organized a small ceremony. She presented Sarah with a necklace incorporating stones from significant places: Devil's Trap Valley, where they'd met; Widow's Peak Cave that had sheltered them; the river crossing that had tested her courage. "Mountain memory," Jennifer called it, "for when you need reminding of your strength." The twins seemed to sense transition. Ethan remained solemn, absorbing activity around him. Emma babbled continuously, her vocabulary expanding daily with new sounds. "They won't remember this place," Sarah realized aloud. "They'll grow up knowing only whatever life I create next." "Children don't retain memories of their first year," Marcus agreed, "but experiences shape them regardless. Your determination, these months ensured they'll grow up knowing protection rather than fear." The drive down the mountain passed through landscapes that now carried personal history. Sarah recognized landmarks, remembered learning their names, recalled moments when each site had seemed threatening rather than protective. At the halfway point, she received a text from Maria. "Richard voluntarily terminated parental rights. Requests contact be limited to therapeutic letters until children reach age of consent. Full custody granted." The message brought relief without triumph. Richard's abdication of fatherhood reflected both selfishness and appropriate understanding. That his children deserved better than whatever he could currently provide. Portland welcomed them with spring rain and cherry blossoms. Julia's embrace at the airport felt like permission to finally exhale completely. Her children, teenagers who'd grown up around Julia's advocacy work, welcomed the twins with gentle expertise. "We've prepared a small apartment," Julia explained, as they drove through the city. 2 bedrooms, play area, close to services. You'll need space to decide what normal looks like for your family." The apartment exceeded expectations. Baby-proofed yet spacious, it included a reading nook where Sarah imagined spending quiet mornings with Emma and Ethan. Over the following weeks, pieces of new life fell into place. Sarah enrolled in online classes to complete her early childhood education degree. She connected with survivor support groups that provided a community without intrusion. The twins adapted to pediatric appointments, baby classes, and gradual socialization beyond their mountain isolation. Marcus maintained contact through occasional letters, updates about mountain weather, wildlife observations, the simplicity of life that continued without dramatic narratives. His final letter arrived 3 months after their departure. Sanctuary served its purpose when it released rather than retained. Your story here concluded perfectly, not with permanence, but with preparation. The mountains remain, ready for the next soul seeking safety from storms. Reading his words, Sarah understood that their mountain chapter had been temporary by necessity and design. The skills it imparted, the strength it revealed, these remained permanently. By autumn, 1 year after fleeing into those mountains, Sarah faced a decision point. Richard had maintained steady progress in therapy, adhered to all custody agreements, and requested supervised visitation with the twins. The first meeting, arranged through court mediators, lasted 30 minutes. Richard appeared different, thinner, quieter, lacking the commanding presence she'd once found both attractive and intimidating. "I won't ask forgiveness," he told her before seeing the children. "Some actions exceed that, but I want you to know I'm working to understand why I became who I was with you." The twins regarded him with infant curiosity rather than recognition. Emma examined his face with scientific interest. Ethan maintained his characteristic observational distance. Sarah watched this encounter with emotions that surprised her. Not the paralyzing fear she'd expected, not even significant anger. Instead, something closer to anthropological interest. Observing a species she no longer belonged to. After Richard left, having maintained appropriate behavior throughout the visit, Sarah made final decisions about their future trajectory. She accepted a position at Julia's Children's Advocacy Center, designing programs for infants affected by domestic trauma. Her master's thesis proposal, Mountain Medicine, How Wilderness Survival Skills Inform Childhood Resilience, gained academic approval and professional notice. The twins celebrated their first birthday in their Portland home, surrounded by a carefully chosen community. Jennifer traveled from the mountains, bringing photographs and small pine seeds from the cabin's grove. Margaret Walsh attended, grandmother title newly earned through action rather than genetics alone. During the celebration, Sarah noticed Emma, attempting to pull herself up using furniture, first steps imminent. Ethan observed his sister's progress with intent focus, perhaps planning his own approach to bipedal motion. "They're ready for whatever comes next," Julia observed, cutting the birthday cake. "We all are," Sarah agreed. That evening, after guests departed and the twins slept contentedly, Sarah stood at her apartment window overlooking the city. Mountains remained visible on the horizon, distant guardians that had transformed her from victim to survivor's guide. The skills learned there, reading danger signs, trusting earned instincts, building community from necessity, now informed daily choices. She'd carried more from those peaks than survival knowledge. She'd transported the understanding that fear could become fuel, isolation could birth strength, and sanctuary could evolve into launching point. 3 months later, while teaching her first workshop on childhood trauma recovery, Sarah received a package postmarked from the mountain region. Inside lay a photograph taken by Jennifer, Sarah, Marcus, and the twins at Widow's Peak, framed by ancient stone and emerging spring. On the reverse, Marcus had written, "Evidence of transformation, proof that dangerous journeys can lead to safe harbors. Keep teaching what the mountains taught you." She displayed the photograph in her office, where it served as daily reminder and inspiration. When clients asked about its significance, Sarah explained simply, "It shows the moment fear stopped chasing me and I began pursuing change." The twins grew like the pine seeds Jennifer had gifted, taking root in more hospitable ground while carrying mountain strength in their DNA. Emma became the bold explorer Julia predicted. Ethan maintained his contemplative nature, surprising everyone with sudden breakthroughs and deep observations. Richard's supervised visits continued monthly, each one revealing incremental healing alongside permanent distance. He'd never again hold power over her decisions, but the twins would eventually know their father as someone working to overcome generational violence. 5 years after their mountain flight, Sarah received an award for her childhood advocacy work. During her acceptance speech, she shared an edited version of their story, a tale of wilderness transformation that inspired others to seek sanctuary when needed. "Sometimes salvation requires solitude," she concluded. "The courage to step away from everything familiar to face fear of the unknown can lead to strength you never knew you possessed. The mountains taught me that survival isn't about returning to who you were. It's about becoming who circumstances demand you to be." In the audience, Julia held 7-year-old Emma while Ethan played quietly with his tablet. Their childhood would include stories of the winter they lived on a mountain, with the guardian who taught their mother to build fires and trust strangers' intentions. The story would become family mythology, not trauma to overcome, but origin, tale of resilience. Emma and Ethan would grow knowing their mother had once been lost in mountains, but found her way through determination, wisdom, and unexpected kindness. That night, Emma asked to hear the mountain story again. Sarah tucked her daughter into bed, thinking of dark nights in the cabin when infant cries echoed off ancient walls. "Once upon a time," Sarah began, "there was a mother and her 2 tiny children who had to learn to be very brave." As she spoke, weaving truth into child-appropriate narrative, Sarah understood that all stories have endings but leave imprints far beyond their final words. Her mountain winter had concluded, but its lessons would ripple through generations, teaching that strength sometimes begins with running, but ultimately requires standing firm. Outside their Portland home, the same stars that had witnessed her mountain nights continued their eternal journey. Somewhere, at the elevation where air thinned and truth condensed, Marcus maintained his cabin, ready for the next desperate soul seeking transformation through wilderness. Sarah had merely borrowed sanctuary briefly. Its gift wasn't in remaining, but in knowing that such places existed when ordinary life became an extraordinary crisis. She'd return to the world equipped not just with survival skills, but with the knowledge that when necessary, impossible journeys become possible through courage's first step. The mountain's whisper carried on urban wind, a reminder that peace often arrived after climbing the highest peaks, both literal and metaphorical. Sarah had descended from those heights, but part of her remained forever attuned to their ancient wisdom, and somewhere in the distance, mountain sentinels stood eternal, guardian witnesses to the truth they'd protected, that single choices made in fear's shadow could transform entire futures when guided by love's unwavering light. In Portland's gentle rain, a mother tucked her children safe, while storms from both past and future could do them no lasting harm. The mountains had taught their final lesson, that surviving winter prepared one perfectly for spring's inevitable arrival. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.